everyone. My name is David Thogmartin, and I'm a director at Deloitte Germany, responsible for AI and trustworthy AI. And it is my distinct pleasure to give you a sneak peek into how we at Deloitte are putting AI to work to help manage wildfire risk. Next page. So why are we doing this? Basically, mid-2021, we were asked by the World Economic Forum to co-found the Fire Aid Initiative. It's a coalition to AI practitioners and experts in fire management with the mission to find a better way to deal with the growing environmental problem of wildfires. And this is a problem of global scale. It costs upward of 200 billion annually in destroyed property and environmental damage and lives and livelihoods. And historically, basically arid regions like the US, California, Australia, Turkey, Greece, South Africa have been most affected. However, global warming has expanded the problem geographically and intensified it, with more frequent and more severe fires becoming harder to fight. So to make our project more manageable, we started with a wildfire-prone region, South Africa, where 116 kilohectares of trees were lost and 3.5 megatons in carbon dioxide were released in the first 20 years of this century. Next page. Our goal is to build a set of tools that help firefighters better prepare and allocate their precious resources. So they are always cash-strapped and have very little time and money to spend on fighting fires. So we wanted to help them with the planning. And this includes 3 elements: outbreak, modeling outbreak of fire, so identifying high-risk fire zones; spread, predicting the path of existing fires; and response, simulating the effectiveness of firefighting strategies. Rather than just trial and error in real life, we wanted to do that in the digital realm. Ours is not the first attempt to forecast wildfires with software. In fact, there have been a great deal of researchers working on this topic, and perhaps the most extensive study was performed back in 1971 by Richard C. Rothermel for the US Forestry Service. He conducted extensive experiments, which gave very empirical evidence to the behavior of fire. So he was able to take these experiments and convert them into multivariable formula. And this logic has been the mainstay for many wildfire models and software providers focused uniquely on the spread of fires that have already started. We were then nonetheless convinced that 50 years later, AI and high-performance computing could bring new possibilities to improve prediction accuracy, and that's for the spread piece. For the outbreak piece, the so-called pre-fire problem, it's been less addressed. And to our knowledge, nobody has tackled the question of addressing effectiveness of various firefighting strategies through a digital twin. Next page, please. This is a very challenging undertaking. Next page, please. So each of the project goals reflect unique challenges. So forecasting outbreak is limited by randomness, where, for instance, lightning will strike, or cigarettes have been dropped, or power lines will fail. And predicting spread requires super resolution in order to be useful. And lastly, interactive simulation, as I mentioned, is completely new territory. So generally speaking, all of these modeling problems, they require sophisticated techniques in order to capture both temporal and geospatial dimensions. Each goal relies on a wide range of inputs, lots of data, much of it requiring substantial pre-processing. And that equates to well-constructed data pipelines, but also to efficient model architectures and having sufficient computing power in the form of GPUs and memory in order to make it all work. Next page, please. Roughly speaking, we split each of those problems, each of those forecasting goals, into 2 parts: the model on one hand, and the data pipeline on the other, that is required in order to feed the model. When we talk about data, we actually started the project processing and analyzing satellite images until we realized that we could substitute the raw images with much more compressed and condensed weather data derived from satellites, but condensed. We further pre-processed this weather data to distill it down to the absolute essential features required for our models, significantly reducing the cost of data handling and of model training. And even after streamlining the data, training the model required substantial computing power. And we split those trainings into batches, which we ran on NVIDIA DGX A100 supercomputer which shortened the training cycle substantially, at least 5 times the way that we had configured the batch sizes. Next page, please. So where are we now? We have completed the first of our 3 project objectives, which is forecasting wildfire outbreak, which we can see on the left. We present the results in a cloud-based interactive map, a heat map, so to speak. Our performance measure is F1 score, for which we've achieved 0.75. That might sound a little bit low to some. I'm used to also other modeling objectives where we're targeting 0.9 or 0.95 even in F1 score. But given the randomness factors at play, we gauge this as an upper bound. And we have some reason to believe that because through the World Economic Forum's Fire Aid Initiative, we're also associated with others working on this in other geographies. And they've come up with not quite as high F1 scores as this, but in a similar range. So we've also wrapped up the conceptualization phase spread and are starting to build and train the model. And while input features overlap very strongly with the first objective outbreak, there are new features which require updates to the data pipeline. And these two models, actually, it's not just the data pipeline, it's actually the modeling itself. It differs greatly in the geospatial aspect. Outbreak must cover the entire country. So that necessitates a lower geographic resolution simply to make it manageable, which we set at 1 square kilometer. Spread, however, is only focused on a point where there's an existing fire. We know that the fire has already ignited, and that allows us to be, let's say, to tune our model and to have a more accurate and finer resolution in order to have better predictions. We're currently working on how to balance that resolution for the optimal model performance. Once we've successfully modeled spread for the pure static case, that's when we start talking about the dynamic simulation environment, which I mentioned earlier, the third objective, response, in which the user can effectively change the landscape through firefighting intervention measures. And then we would simulate how these measures would alter the path of the fire. And again, the reason why we want to do this is because in our discussions with firefighters, they mentioned how much of what they do up until now is trial and error in the real world based on past experience, based on gut feel. And that's becoming increasingly difficult simply because fires are becoming more intense, vegetation is drier, also fires are more frequent, so they need something better. And this is why we thought, let's take it to the digital realm where they can try various things out in a digital twin and then decide which of those measures, which can be costly, flying airplanes over a region and dumping Phos-Chek on a fire, that can be costly. So let's try out these different measures in the digital realm and then see which is most effective before really trying it out. Next page, please. So wrapping it up with this pro bono project, we aim to deliver a planning tool that both reduces the risk of to the lives of firefighters, they're putting their lives at risk on the front line, as well as gaining valuable time, because when you're fighting fires, every minute counts. Interested parties, I've listed out here, the stakeholders could be environmental authorities in fire-prone geographies, but also reinsurers who deal with natural catastrophes and have their models for every kind of natural catastrophe peril, or banks with real estate loans exposed to fire, or utility companies. They've also expressed interest because one of the triggers of wildfires can be power line faults, and they want to limit their risk and their liability. Also, what we learned from modeling a wildfire, we can apply to other scenarios, such as the spread of fire indoors, in warehouses, for example, or even beyond fire into flood risk. These are topics that are very interesting to architects, engineers, and insurers in general. So that basically wraps it up. Quick flyover about wildfire. I'd be happy if we have time for 1 or 2 questions. Thank you very much for your attention and enjoy the remainder of the Deloitte AI Institute's 24 Hours of AI.